This lesson is all about how to answer that dreaded weakness question. It's a question that has brought down many a worthy candidate, so let's make sure you're prepared to handle it gracefully. It's an awkward question. Certainly it would be considered a nosy and rude question in most settings, but is somehow considered perfectly appropriate in job interviews. Most candidates hate this question, and many consider it pointless. After all, they aren't about to confess candidly to their biggest flaws in the middle of a job interview. And most of us don't have much practice speaking in a neutral way about our flaws and insecurities. However, this question has become a cliche for a reason. Unfortunately, the weakness question is still asked a lot across industries, companies, and levels of seniority. Interviewers still love this question because it makes them feel like they're being thorough and hard-hitting. You may get lucky and have a more enlightened interviewer, but I recommend that every candidate be prepared with a good answer to the weakness question, just in case. I have seen many great candidates get tripped up by the weakness question. It can be very difficult to talk about your flaws in a stressful situation like a job interview. Negative topics require added diplomacy. Meanwhile, you're nervous and thinking about 1,000 other things. Is my hair sticking up? Is my breath okay? Why did he just frown like that? What am I going to say if he asks why I left my last job? However, there is a way to answer that is honest and authentic and still increases your odds of getting a job offer. A good weakness answer has two important parts. Part one is your weakness. Briefly describe a real weakness that wouldn't be a major handicap on the job. More on how to choose a good weakness in a minute. Part two is how you're already working on that weakness. Part two is the critical component. Discuss your proactive efforts to improve. This shows that you are self-aware, have a drive to be your best, and that the weakness will not slow you down. So let's talk first about how to choose a good weakness. You want to be authentic. Don't select a weakness just because it sounds good. You'll make a better impression with sincerity. That doesn't mean you have to share a weakness that makes you look bad. If you're like most of us, you have several weaknesses, and at least one of them will be interview friendly. You also want to pick a weakness that is acceptable for the job at hand. Be aware of the job requirements and don't cite a weakness related to any of the required skills or desired qualities. If you're an accountant, don't talk about hating math or lack of attention to detail. If you're in sales, don't confess to being too reserved or lacking persistence. Next, select a weakness that is relatively minor and fixable. By fixable, I mean it's something you can improve through work and motivation. For example, fixable is, I get nervous when speaking in front of large groups. You can get better through practice and learning new skills, and this is a common development area. Harder to fix? I am very shy and often have trouble speaking up in meetings. While there's nothing wrong with being shy, an interviewer could assume that the candidate would have trouble collaborating in a team environment. Next tip, describe your weakness in a concise, neutral way. Don't feel like you have to go into great detail. Be brief, and most importantly, avoid sounding defensive or overly negative. Then it's on to part two. Demonstrate that you are working on your weakness. In the second part of your answer, you need to describe how you have already taken steps to improve in your area of weakness. Here's why. First, a great candidate is always looking for ways to learn and grow. Two, a fabulous candidate then takes the initiative to improve. Use your answer to demonstrate your motivation to be the best at what you do. This is how to truly emphasize the positive when talking about your weakness. Okay, so now let's look at some examples of strong answers to what is your greatest weakness. Example one is delegation. I think one area I could work on is my delegation skills. I'm always so concerned about everything being done right and on time that I can get stuck in that mentality of, if you want it done right, do it yourself. Unfortunately, that's not always possible, and I realize that I can slow things down if I'm too controlling. I learned this recently when given the opportunity to manage the department's summer interns. I had never managed direct reports before, so this was a hugely educational experience in many different ways. It definitely taught me how to delegate, and my manager noticed a difference in my management style at the end of the summer. I know that I can benefit from additional development in this area as well. So I signed up for a management skills training course, and I'm always looking for opportunities to manage projects for our group. Why does this work? This is a good example for a junior level employee in a role in which delegation abilities are not critical. Please note that the last sentence in the first paragraph is important because it acknowledges how the weakness can be a problem and why it's worth working on. The weakness is acknowledged and described, but the emphasis is more on how the candidate has sought out ways to improve. Keep in mind that this is not such a terrific answer if you're applying for a job that requires you to manage people. Example two, too direct. Sometimes I can be a bit too honest when I provide feedback to coworkers. My personality is naturally very straightforward and to the point, and most of my colleagues really value that. but I have learned that there are times on the job when more diplomacy is required. I took a training class on conflict management, and it really opened my eyes to the need to communicate differently with different people. So now I'm much better at providing constructive feedback, even if it doesn't always come naturally. Why does this one work? This weakness is described well. The candidate notes how directness has been a weakness, while also making it clear that he is not a raging jerk to his coworkers. In the second part, he talks about concrete steps that he has taken and how he has improved. And example 3, public speaking. Honestly, I would say that public speaking is an area that I could work on. I tend to get nervous when asked to present to a large group of people. In small team meetings, I'm the first one to stand up and present, but put me in front of a big group and I can get flustered. I actually spoke to my manager about this, and we set it as one of my development goals for the year. I took an internal presentation skills class and attended some meetings of Toastmasters, a networking group for people who want to improve their communication skills. With some practice, I started to feel more comfortable. Last month, I even volunteered to represent our team at a division-wide town hall. I only had to present for 10 minutes, but I did it and got great feedback. It was actually kind of fun. So I plan on continuing to seek out opportunities to improve in this area. Why does this work? Fear of public speaking is a common fear. In this sample answer, the candidate makes it clear that she has no trouble communicating in general, which could be a red flag. It's just getting up in front of a big group that scares her. She goes on to describe how she identified the weakness, spoke with her manager about it, and then took proactive steps to improve. She even has a little triumph at the end. And now, a few words about what not to do. Here are the mistakes that candidates typically make, and you may be able to relate. First, trying to turn a negative into a positive. You'll find many articles that advise you to turn negative into a positive by sharing a supposed weakness that is actually a desirable quality. A few examples. I am too much of a perfectionist. I work too hard sometimes. I care too much about my work. It's an old trick, and the interviewer sees right through it. In fact, this approach will likely make her think you're hiding something. Second thing to avoid, refusing to answer the question. Some candidates will assert that they can't think of a single weakness. This is probably because they freeze up and are afraid to say the wrong thing. This answer also makes you look like you're hiding something, or you're just not at all self-aware. And finally, revealing a weakness that raises red flags. Another mistake is to be too candid and confess to a weakness that would hinder your ability to excel in the role. I once had a coaching client answer, "I have trouble getting up in the morning and getting to work on time." His real weakness was that he was way too honest. Okay, so that brings us to the end of this lesson on answering interview questions about your weaknesses. Now you're ready to come up with a strong answer about your own weaknesses. Then you'll never have to stress about these dreaded questions again.